Well, again, good morning. Good morning. I want to thank you all for joining us for this kickoff event for the Voters' Choice Los Angeles. I'm Rosalind Gold. I'm the chair of the Board of Advisors of the Future of California Elections, which is a network of civic engagement organizations, advocates, and election officials who have come together to work to modernize elections in the state and expand participation and accessibility. Well, we launched our Voters' Choice California project in 2017 to support the implementation of the Voters' Choice Act and its model of providing more modern and more accessible elections. And if you don't know that much about the Voters' Choice Act, you're going to be learning a lot about that and about what we call VCA elections today. And we are currently working to support and work very closely with our partners at Los Angeles County to support the implementation and the transition to the VCA model and approach in Los Angeles County. We are going to follow up with you after this event. We hope we'll have webinars, hope to provide you additional information, and hope to convene and reconvene you for future conference calls and webinars. For those of you who are big on social media, you can use the hashtag LA, capital LA, votes on social media. And we're going to encourage you during the lunch break. It'll be like show and tell. You see those machines that are back there? We're going to encourage you to check out the new ballot marking device, our e-poll books, and LA County Registrar, Recorder County Clerk's Office would be delighted if you would take a look at how those machines work. We also are going to invite you to please come to community meetings in your area all through the county, which are being set up to educate voters in the communities that you work with about the new voting experience. As a matter of fact, if you're around tonight and you can go over to East Los Angeles from 6 o'clock to 8 p.m., the organization that I'm with, the NALEO Educational Fund, will be doing an event in East Los Angeles. And two of my partners, Miguel and Mark, on the back there, so they should have, you have flyers for people, right? And information on how to get to that event. And there's also flyers on the resource table. Always with our conferences, we need your feedback on how we're doing, so please make sure that you fill out the evaluation form. Okay. So what I'd like to do to start our day off is to introduce a very, very distinguished speaker, Secretary of State Alex Padilla. And Secretary Padilla, it's very fitting that he is the speaker, the opening speaker for this event. First of all, in his role as Secretary of State, he has led several initiatives to modernize elections in California, including the implementation of the new motor voter law. And he was a leader in saying, you know what, if properly implemented, Voters' Choice Act elections can provide greater accessibility and improved voter experience for all Californians. Another reason that he is a fitting speaker to start our event is he's actually what I would call a hometown hero. He has roots that go very deep into LA County. He started his public service career on the LA City Council, was elected council president 3 times. Then he moved on to the state senate. And then when he was elected Secretary of State, he brings with him a great depth of wealth and experience with the issues that face us in Los Angeles County. He is not someone afraid to shy away from tough challenges, because his latest initiative is to look at really serious issues of election cybersecurity and making sure that all of our voters get very importantly accurate and do not get fake information as they learn about how to vote and the issues that face them. I'm also delighted to say that Diego is with us. Can you say hi, Diego? Hi, who is a future California voter and probably a public leader in some capacity, so we're glad you could be with us. So again, I'd like to ask Secretary Padilla to join us for our opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosalind. I was going to give her a hug because we're part of the NALEO family. Worked closely with Rosalind when I was not just an active member, still am, but on the board, and for 3 years as president of NALEO. So frankly, all of you are extended family because we're all committed to improving civic engagement in the state of California. Before I get started, yes, it's not Take Your Dad to Work Day. It's like the beginning of summer vacation. So if you're going to be at a lot of the events this summer that I will be at, prepare to see Diego or Alex or Roman or two or all three at different times. But you know, we talk about taking our children with us to go vote, right? To try to build that tradition, that experience, that habit in them. So it's only fitting that we bring children to boot camp. To start training them about the changes coming to Los Angeles, which I got to tell you, I'm very, very excited about. I know there's a great program put together, and of course, LA County's fearless leader, Dean Logan, will do a deeper dive into a little bit of ESAP and a lot of Voters' Choice Act and what it means for Los Angeles County specifically. So I'm going to resist the temptation to get into it. But frankly, put today's boot camp and the 2020 year in a bigger context, because it's an important context. We'll start with the state of California, and then we're going to go national here. In the state, in 2014, when I was elected Secretary of State the first time, we had a record low participation rate. There were 17.2 million or so voters on the rolls. And that was a little bit of a bump up because we had just launched online registration a couple years prior. But turnout was horrendous. Turnout in November 2014 was about 42.5%. Right? So the majority of registered voters didn't even show up. They sat it out. And that's not looking at the, close to 6 million probably at the time eligible but unregistered voters. So we knew we had a lot of work to do, and that's frankly why I ran for this office, to see what we can do to boost registration rates. What could we do to boost participation rates? And with the bigger idea of having California be the counterexample to what we saw happening in a lot of other parts of the country, right? You've been hearing about voter ID and purging of voter rolls and reduction or elimination of early voting opportunities, and all taken together, states moving policy agendas that make it harder for an eligible citizen to register and to stay registered and to actually cast their ballot. My point of view, frankly, un-American, right? So California is not just going to say no to those policies, but we have an opportunity and an obligation to show a better way. And that's exactly what we're doing. My first initiative as secretary was to propose automatic voter registration in the state. So that was passed by the legislature, signed into law in 2015, and launched last year. And despite some hiccups early on, Dean might describe them differently, the fact of the matter is it's been an overwhelming success, right? We launched last April. Between April and November, there was about 750,000 previously eligible but unregistered voters added to the rolls. That was a big part of achieving not just record registration going into last November, but record turnout as well. A couple months ago, we announced that registration in California is now past 20 million, right? It was 17 not that long ago. We're past 20 million and on pace to be over 21 million statewide by the next year's March primary, right, and going strong. So that's what we're doing on the registration side. Same day registration, online, pre-registration, a lot more to talk about, but automatic registration has been huge. But going back to that November 2014 experience, when half the registered voters sat it out, we know that just getting people registered and on the rolls doesn't guarantee that they're going to turn out and vote. So what can we do to maintain the security and integrity of our elections, but frankly, make voting a more customer-friendly experience? And so we proposed for California a election administration model similar to what they do in the state of Colorado. And again, without getting too much into the weeds, I don't want to steal other people's thunder, but more people getting their ballot in the mail automatically, more days of in-person voting, flexibility of voting anywhere in the county, convenient to you, a whole suite of opportunities that we packaged as the Voters' Choice Act. Passed by the legislature, signed into law in 2016, and went into effect last year, 2018. So 2018, 5 counties made the transition to the Voters' Choice Act. We had record registration and turnout last year, 64.5% turnout last November. So not just a huge increase from 2014, even more impressive if you look at the number of registers that we added to the rolls. The 5 counties that adopted the Voters' Choice Act for last year all exceeded the statewide record turnout. And that's not a coincidence. And Mindy's done the studies, and she'll be talking about it as well if you missed her op-ed in the LA Times. And so we know it works, right? We're making it easier to register, easier to participate. And we'll get into what that means for Los Angeles County in 2020, but I want to also make a point of this. It's not insignificant that our primary next year will be in March, not June. Diego, shh, don't steal my thunder. Driven primarily, but not just by the role of the presidential election, right? California has historically been one of the last states to vote in the primary, not one of the first, rendering our votes, frankly, meaningless when it comes to helping select nominees of all parties. This wasn't a partisan thing. We wanted to make California voters relevant in the presidential contests. And that's exactly what's happening as we speak, by California being one of the first states to vote. And frankly, people who vote by mail start getting their vote by mail ballots in the mailbox the day that Iowa is going to go to caucus. It's frankly forcing, not just incentivizing, forcing candidates to come to California, not just to raise money, but to spend time engaging voters. Right? One of my staff members, who shall remain nameless, kind of texted to a group of us like, wow, Buttigieg is in Fresno. When was the last time you saw a presidential candidate doing a town hall in Fresno? I said, no, here's the bigger question. When was the last time Chris Matthews was in Fresno? Think about that, right? And so that's what's happening in not just Los Angeles, not just San Francisco, but Fresno, San Diego. They'll be coming to Riverside. They're going to be going all over the place because California matters. And we know that as a result, voters will be more engaged. We're going to see more bumps in registration. I predict record turnout, both in the primary and in the general. And so if you take this all together, what does it mean? It means California has a bigger voice in the national political landscape. And it's not just California generically. The large population and the growing and increasingly diverse electorate of California has a stronger voice in the national political landscape. In 2018, we called Sacramento County the tip of the spear for all these efforts because they were the largest county that adopted the Voters' Choice Act. And it was a very consequential 2018 election. But in 2020, Los Angeles County will be front and center. Los Angeles County is already, as you know, the largest political jurisdiction in America. And now the voters of Los Angeles County are benefiting from automatic, systematic, record-breaking voter registration. They'll benefit from the additional options and choices made possible through the Voters' Choice Act. And when more voters in Los Angeles County weigh in, those voices will echo statewide and across the nation. And it's not just that when we go vote for president, there's going to be a whole lot of other things on the ballot. So increasing turnout for House races, for legislative races, for ballot measures, for local races, that's all good for democracy. And we're all here to learn what else we can do individually and for the organizations that we represent to be part of this movement. So thank you all for being here. Thank you all for your commitment. Thank you all for your efforts over the course of the next year and a half. And Rosalind, Dean, the whole family here, thank you, thank you, thank you. I know LA County is going to make us proud. So I was told not to do a 45-minute keynote so that we can take some questions. So let's do a couple questions before we move on with the program. Don't be shy. Yes.
Of the online systems and database.
Okay. Quick question, and I'll try to give a brief answer, was about can you do a quick brief on the issues of security? And so I guess there's two categories in which to speak. One will be about the voting systems themselves, because people want to know how do we make sure we're not hacked and votes get counted properly and nobody's manipulating the results. And then separately, there's what about our voter registration databases, if I heard you correctly. So maybe let me start there. Because we do have online voter registration, right? So it's only logical to think, well, there's some connectivity, some openness to that system. Well, please know that there's a difference between online voter registration and the voter registration database, right? With layers of firewalls and encryption and everything in between. The voter registration database, among the best practices that we do practice in California are things like we back it up every day, right? So extreme scenario, we're going to do everything to prevent some sort of breach or hack. Hack is a term used too loosely, right? I like to be more specific on what people are talking about. But let's say something happened to our voter registration database. The worst thing that happens is you go back to 11:59 last night and rebuild from there, right? So, and we can, if you wanted a deeper dive, we can spend time on encryption technologies and firewalls and all the other things that go into protecting our voter registration database. I think more people really wonder, well, how do we know our votes are counted and our votes are secure? So here's Election Security 101, right? There's been a couple of policies in place in California since well before 2016 that have served us very, very well. No system for voting, nothing currently in place, not VSAP, not anything, can be used by any county in California unless it's been tested and certified first. So we put it through the ringer, and it has to meet or exceed the security requirements that we have in California, which frankly exceed the requirements that the Elections Assistance Commission has at the federal level. And we don't just test it once and hope that it continues to work properly. Every county, as Dean will tell you, is required to conduct what's known as logic and accuracy testing before every election, basically confirming that the machines are functioning properly. California prohibits our voting systems to be connected to the internet, to make it impossible to systematically hack or rig an election. California requires paper ballots and a voter-verified paper trail, right, that we can use to not just count the votes, but recount the votes when necessary. And California requires after every election for every county to conduct what's known as a post-election audit, whether it's a random sample of the precincts and doing a manual tally, or moving in a direction of what's known as a risk-limiting audit, which is just a more sophisticated methodology. The point is we have all these checks along the way to ensure the accuracy and the integrity of the results. But we did learn a lot in 2016 in a couple of different categories. And if you read the Mueller report or the indictments that preceded it, they're actually very informative. If you really, really want to know. Part of it was, what agents of the Russian government were trying to do to penetrate or compromise, find vulnerabilities, frankly, in voting systems, registration database, and vendors. And so we've used that to improve not just our technology, upgrading, replacing servers, and et cetera, but frankly, training staff. Right? You can have the best technology in place, but if your staff is still clicking on that email from the long lost uncle who wants to transfer the lottery money, right, that's not a good thing. And so training of state election staff, working in partnership with counties to train county election staff is a big part of what we're doing. California is investing in upgrading and modernizing our elections equipment statewide. There's still a lot of counties that are using very old equipment that wasn't tested or certified to the most recent standards. So now we're decertifying those and putting state money in play to help those counties make the proper investments in equipment as well as training. So we're doing all of that on that front. But the big challenge I foresee going into 2020 is going to continue to be the challenges of misinformation. Right, the wrong information online, maybe isolated here and there, or maybe very concerted misinformation campaigns that we saw in 2016. We saw them in 2018. They didn't get as much headlines, but they were there, and the precursors are already there in 2020. So it's going to be incumbent upon all of us to work together to make sure that voters get accurate, trustworthy, reliable information about the process. Voter registration, when, where, how, voting, when, where, how, so that we can try to minimize the impact of the misinformation that's going to be out there. So that's the brief answer, believe it or not. A lot more to it than that. And I'll let Dean fill in the blanks of anything I might have missed or overlooked. Any other questions? Yes, and then over here. Bad news and good news. The bad news is no. The good news is because we haven't stopped. When we launched pre-registration a couple of years ago, it wasn't just for the cycle. Pre-registration has continued nonstop. We are well over 300,000 16 and 17-year-olds who have pre-registered to vote, and that's growing each and every day because that pre-registration is actually built into automatic registration. So when 16 and 17-year-olds go in to apply for their state ID or their driver's license, they're being captured in the process too, in a good way. Just a nice fact that I thought was pretty impressive. More than 100,000 of the pre-registrants turned 18 before last November's election. So we didn't have to chase them in that tight window between their 18th birthday and election day. On their 18th birthday, they're automatically added to the rolls and they're ready to go participate. So I'm shooting for 500,000 by next year, and I think we're well on pace to achieve that. Over here and then back over here. Yes, table 5.
We're really concerned about hard to count population at Los Angeles, both politically. It's also the hardest to count. Question coming up, and then like a few events in March. I was wondering, what are your thoughts on about how this back to California?
So you must have been talking to the governor a couple of months ago. Because if you haven't heard, I've also been named the chair of the California Complete Count Committee to oversee this. We just had a committee meeting on Tuesday of this week. Alfonso, guy who works for you, he was there as part of the agenda. And frankly, I took on the additional responsibility without the additional funding. More than willingly, because there's a lot of synergy between our outreach on voter registration and turnout in communities with lower participation rates and those same hard to count communities as defined by the census. So all of our outreach infrastructure and partnerships and willingness to partner with a lot of folks that we put into play on the election side, we're translating into census outreach as well. So specifically, census begins March 12th, correct? So our primary is March 4th. So we're going to be doing a lot of work to get people to register and get people to vote by mail or on March 4th. And then you can take a day off. And we're going to keep on going, right, into March, saying, okay, now we voted, you voted, now we got to get counted, right, and continue that outreach activity through March and well into April. Specifically, what that looks like is taking shape right now. At the state level, there's some statewide strategies, communication, PR stuff going on, but most of the investment is going to be happening regionally and locally. And so the California Community Foundation is the lead for Los Angeles County. A lot of partner organizations under that umbrella, fleshing out the strategies and plans as we speak to do outreach in LA County. And the same is happening in all regions of the state. So go to the California Complete Count Committee website, see a whole schedule of workshops dedicated to just that, and I invite you all to participate. And just one small example, because of the timing of our primary and the census window, we're utilizing the state's voter information guide to disseminate census information. Right, our voter information guide will go to no less than 13.5 million households in the state of California. And so how visible can we get that census information in that voter information guide? That doesn't cover all 40 million Californians, but that's pretty deep penetration, right? And so we're looking at utilizing tools like that. Another one is we got approvals and funding and the capability of emailing every voter in the state of California that we have an email for. It's actually more than 8 million, right? Not every voter, but 8 million is a pretty big number. We'll be at closer to 10 million as 2020 approaches. So now we can email people census reminders too, separate and apart from the election information that they get. Imagine if every state department, every state agency utilized that thinking. What can we do to help get the word out? If every county and every city thought to themselves, how can we help get the word out? If every transit agency, if every utility that sends out bills, would do the same, how can we help get the word out? Collectively, we can make a huge, huge impression and go a long way in both educating people, providing the comfort that they need to be able to participate in this federal survey, but by reminding them how important it is. So thank you for being here. Yes.
Registration. So I'm a mom whose son just turned 18, literally 16 last week. And I thought about registering him online, but my concern is with minors. My question to you is, if our kids register online, how secure is that information, and who would have access to it? Once these young kids, now young adults at 18, when that information transfers over, how much of that is actually available?
Okay. Well, again, we're talking about technology and all the security measures that we put into maintaining that information. So for the pre-registrants, all that information is completely private because they're minors, right? When they turn 18, we added them to the voter rolls with voter registration information, no more, no less. And voter registration information in California, contrary to popular belief, is not public information. Some of it is made available for certain authorized uses, like journalists, academic research, political campaigns. That's how they do their outreach. So there's only certain allowable uses of some of a voter's information, but it's not blood type and their entire social security number and all that other stuff. It's only what is defined to be made available: name, address, political party preference, etc. Yeah.
That is a big concern, obviously, as a mom. I don't want to have them turn 18 and have all this issue, right? So.
Yeah, no, we appreciate that, and we've taken it to heart. Last question before Diego has to go to his next appointment. Yes. Okay, great. So again, it's all kind of coming together in real time. So I'd love to see everybody engage in this process. State level grants have been awarded to each region. In each region of the state, either the county is taking the lead and or one of the larger nonprofit organizations in that region. Again, for LA County, that's the California Community Foundation. And so they're in charge of both strategies and partnerships within that umbrella and for that footprint. And the strategies can shift from region to region, right? What works well here in Los Angeles may or may not work in Imperial County. What works in Imperial may or may not work in Fresno or San Francisco or, Siskiyou. And so, what's going to be the most help? Is it events? Is it going door to door? Is it phone banks? Is it inviting people into libraries and utilizing computer access there, et cetera? That's the input that's required to help inform the strategy for each region. What I can tell you is this: there's going to be a couple of every 10 years, the census is challenging enough, right? How do you do a national population count, a survey that everybody participates in? Especially in some communities that are considered hard to count, you're overcoming a confidence in government issue, whether it's by young people or lower income folks who just aren't as engaged or trustworthy, immigrant community. But 2020, on top of all that, has some additional challenges. Yes, the national political environment today. Nobody's fault in this room, but it's a reality that we're all contending with, right? So how do we get people to acknowledge that and still say, no, it is important for me to participate in the census, and I will. For the first time, they're making a big effort to make it a digital first census. So instead of getting a form in the mail that we all have to fill out, most of us will receive a postcard with instructions of how to go online to submit our information to the U.S. Census Bureau, to the Department of Commerce, to this administration. So there's the privacy issues that come with that. There's the cybersecurity issues that come with that we have to explain to people to provide that confidence, because it's important people participate in the census. And you probably have heard this already. There's this potential or probability that the census will question the citizenship of every person in America. That's how I label it, because that's what they're doing. Questioning the citizenship of every person in America. That will further discourage or intimidate people from participating, and we're going to have to work hard to overcome that. So we've got our work cut out for us, but we know why the census is important. Most people, if you know one thing about the census, you know that it determines federal funding for the next 10 years for the state and for every community. So if you care about transportation or housing or education, healthcare, on and on and on, we need everybody to participate in the census. Census data informs the reapportionment process, right? So how many representatives is California going to have in Congress for the next 10 years? Depends on census participation. And by extension, census data is also utilized for redistricting purposes. So within California, as we're adjusting the House districts, the legislative districts, the supervisorial districts, the city council districts, and school board districts statewide, if we have an undercount or otherwise inaccurate census data, that makes fair redistricting extremely difficult, and that undermines voting rights. So it comes full circle. Future of California elections. The census is important too. And so let's keep that on our checklist. 2020 is a big year. We don't just have 2 rounds of activity. We have 3. The primary, the general, and the census in between. And I know Jenny from Ultimate will stand up later on and tell you all about what they're doing, going hand-to-hand combat in the Ultimate service territory, right? So, all right. Thank you all very much for your time and attention, and have a great day.